What's going on, everybody? Dan here from 7th Tower, and in today's video I'll be doing a quick tips and tricks on my digital painting and how I go about doing most of my stuff. And I made a video a couple days ago, but I felt it was just unnecessarily long, so I'm decided just to make a quick one, or just trying to shorten it and just give you guys the basic points and not all that rambling. So we're going to open up Photoshop here, and I'm going to make a quick point that this isn't how I draw or how I paint things, like how I make things realistic, or just kind of how I paint awesome concepts and stuff like that, because that's more about fundamentals and learning things, either by school or just, the approach I took was just practice, practice, practice fucking every day, um, until you kind of embed it into your brain, because realistically I can't. And another point is that I can't really teach you because I don't really know how I do it. I just do it. It's kind of like doing it over and over again, and not taking any kind of lessons. Kind of just it just became a habit. So it's I can't really explain it, but I will do my best in future videos. I will try to explain a couple things, like how I paint hair, and um, like kind of the art of making things a little bit more realistic. But in this video, this is just kind of like the basic tips and stuff like that, and how I go about doing it. So we're going to open up a file here, which is my Kelly Bundy painting that I did a while back. And Kelly Bundy is obviously Christina Applegate from, or the character she played in Married with Children, which is an awesome ass fucking show. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you guys the layers, and what I need to do first is I need to make a kind of a background layer here. And a good thing about Photoshop is that, or in order for you to use Photoshop actually to its full advantage, is if you understand or just kind of memorize what the shortcuts are. Sorry, I tend to stutter sometimes. So anyways, I'll be spitting out some shortcuts here and there, so just follow along with me if you can. So firstly, whenever I do a portrait of some sort, or just pretty much any kind of painting that I do, I will draw a sketch first. And or just make a pencil drawing. Sometimes it's an actual pencil drawing, other times it's just a sketch. This is the actual pencil drawing of Christina Applegate, the one I was going to use, but there was an actual sketch to it. What I do here is I scan it in at 300 dpi, and I drag it into Photoshop and stuff, and I will hit Control L, which brings up the levels, and I will drag the. Oh, I'm on the wrong layer here. Always make sure you're on the right layer. I'll hit Control L, bring up the levels, and I'll select the one on the far left all the way to where the curve kind of starts going up. And it looks really shitty right now, but that's because I have already done it once, so it looks kind of bad. And what that does is kind of drops down the grays a little bit, brings up the blacks a little bit more, so you're gonna be able to see it. It looks a little bit more crisper, and yeah, it's gonna help you in the long run. So basically, when I set that layer to, it's already set here. You can go to the layer styles. You set it to multiply, so that way when you start doing the color flats underneath that, you're gonna kind of see it a little bit. Or what you can basically do from here on out, just start painting, and start painting underneath that. Like if I were to make a layer, this is a good example actually. And I don't know where my colors went. There we go. So what we're gonna do is you're gonna start painting here, so you can the paint shines, or the paint shows up underneath it, because that layer is set to multiply. But that's not how I do it. What I do is I make color flats, and this is typically a comic book kind of style. This is how we color in comic books, the comic book field, and my pretty much my style is deviated from comic books, stuff. I'm really inspired by comic art and junk like that. So and this is the way I learned how to color in Photoshop, was like the comic book way. So I incorporate all that knowledge into my digital painting, and for me personally, it just made my whole process just a little bit easier. And what color flats are, they're just solid, big old chunks of color, just to retain, just the area. And I use this because, well, I could later go in and highlight a color using the magic wand tool, and highlight it, and select the color dynamically, and just change things at will. And how I make the color flats are with just the lasso tool. You could hit L on your keyboard and bring up the lasso tool, and I'll turn up the anti-alias, and I'll set the feather to 0, and I'll just go in with on the layer. I'll just make like a kind of like a rough selection. These selections aren't precise or anything like that because they don't need to be. And I'll just make a selection, and then I'll fill that in using the the pencil work as a guide. And I'll just choose a color and I fill it in. You can see here that it's really off. I think that's just due to my layers, but once the flat process is complete, I'll just copy it. You can see here it says paint and then paint copy. I'll copy the flats, and then on the original flat layer, well actually on the copy layer, I'll actually lock that down so I don't work on it anymore, and so I don't accidentally start painting on it basically. And then I'll turn that off, and I'll turn on the original flat layer, and then during this point in the process the pencil work is not needed anymore, so I'll turn that off and I'll start painting on here. You can obviously see that this is done, that this flat layer is already rendered out and everything, but this is when it comes the copy layer comes into effect. Like say I want to change a specific color, I could turn that layer back on, hit W on your keyboard to get the magic wand tool, and these settings are, all these boxes are checked off with a tolerance of 0. And say I want to change the color of her bottom lip. Actually, you need to be on that layer. Then you click on that color and it highlights that. And now we could just turn that layer off, go back to the actual painting. And it looks like it's really off, so what we're going to do is we're just going to nudge it over just a little bit. And now we have her lips selected. And now we can hit Control U to bring up the hue, saturation, and lightness sliders, and you could just kind of change it around. And this makes things a hell of a lot easier when you're changing color, because not only are your kind of your tones already established, like your kind of the levels of the kind of things. I forgot. Sorry, I'm spazzing out right now. But you could just change the color while it's gonna stay appropriate. You could also change the saturation if you choose to, and stuff like that. I don't really recommend you change the lightness. It's gonna kind of throw everything off just a little bit. And so we could just apply that. Hit Control D to deselect it. And now if I zoom in here, you're gonna notice that the lines are just kind of broken off and too sharp of an edge. We don't really want that. So but that's alright. We could change that by easily painting it out. And of course, I'm gonna talk about my brush settings now, because we're gonna get into it. The way I set out my brushes are, you can see here that I have kind of like numerically ordered, and this just helps out like just choosing a brush a little bit quicker. And how I do that is these number brushes are just numbered, kind of I just type out a number and then I make that into a brush. And you can make brushes. I actually show you how to make that in one of my other videos, but I have them organized, and kind of like all these are hard edge brushes going in from different sizes, so I can just choose one. Soft edge brushes, and we got my chalk brushes here, and these are just like random, just kind of brushes I use for texture and stuff like that. All these stuff can be found online. Just look up free brushes. It doesn't really matter. I rarely use any of these at all. The ones I use are pretty much 1 to 3, the rows 1 to 3, and the one I use mainly for my digital paintings is this chalk brush, and this is default Photoshop brush. So the settings I have over here are the opacity. I drop it down to like around a high 40, and the flow around to like 50. The opacity, I don't know if it's just CS6 or not, but I don't know. I tend to have to lower it a little bit. The other ones, at least CS3, the other one the other Photoshop I have, I didn't have to go that low. But what we can do here, oh yeah, and in the brush, kind of thing over here, the brush window, I have none of these boxes checked. Like the transfer is, or the opacity jitter is turned off, and so it's just shape dynamics. So I like controlling that manually. I like change the brushes with the ring on my tablet. And the opacity, I just like moving the slider or hitting any of the numbers on your keyboard, and I'll change that. This build up and smoothing, this like CS6 stuff, I'm not even really sure what the fuck that does. But so we can go in here, and we could let's make sure we're on the right layer. Yes, we are. We could just choose a color here, and if you hold, when you have your brushes out, if you hold Alt, that'll just bring up the color picker, the eyedrop tool, and we can just select the color and make a stroke, and pretty much you just color pick and brush, just kind of blending these colors in together. And you can already see that that edge is already disappearing, and I'm blending these two. Okay. And the more, obviously, the more you blend, or the more you kind of merge these two colors, or any of the colors together, the more your brush strokes are gonna be unapparent. And my work tends to be that way. Like a lot of the times, you can't really see my brush strokes, and it adds a high level of realism to it. But I'm starting not to like that habit. I'm starting to use a lot of bigger brushes, because normally when I do paint, I actually do go in this zoomed in and kind of work it out at this size. You can see here that the brush strokes in this area are really small, and it's like a brush around this big, and it goes down even smaller, you know. And it just adds the realism to it, I think. And that's pretty much it. I mean, that's how I do it. Digital painting for portraits. I mean, I like to just zoom in and just work it out. But you can see here that a lot of places are kind of like sporadic and just kind of chaotic, like the hair. But that's exactly what I'm going for. I want things to, I don't want everything to be super detailed and like super realistic. And that's because, well, your eye's not really used to seeing so much detail at once. It likes to focus in on certain things, and it kind of blurs out the rest. So it's just more natural to your eye, and I think it's a little bit more adds just a little bit more charm to the painting as a whole. Because if you look over here at the navigator, over here, it looks pretty realistic. It looks pretty spot on, even when her lips all weird and purple that way. But it looks pretty spot on, right? But when you zoom in and stuff, and you look at the hair, you can just see it's like a fucking mess. And that's alright, because to me, I think, it's my personal opinion, where the more you imply, the more you can get away with implying things, the cooler your painting is. You don't have to go all out. So another way I do it, another way I digitally paint is just kind of like the comic book way, I guess. And the way I'll make an example here. I'll turn my flats on one more time. Actually, I need to nudge these. Yeah, that's about right. What I'm gonna do is hit Control J and just copy that. It'll be a copy too. I'll turn and I'll lock this one, and I'll start painting on this one. What I do is I select the Magic Wand tool. I'll highlight a color, and this is super like derivative from coloring in comic books. This is pretty much what I learned. And I will select the color, and I will layer via copy it, and I'll lock this on, the transparent pixels, and that way I can't paint outside of it. And I'll show an example of that. Like, see if I keep moving this way, but it doesn't go beyond her face. And pretty much this is really simplistic way to render, to paint things out. I could even choose colors from over here and just kind of, you know, kind of blend these two together. And I do this kind of painting a lot, actually, for different projects. It depends on the project, of course. Like if I'm doing a super realistic painting, line art is not the way to go. Oops. But sometimes line art in digital painting looks kind of cool, so I like to keep some projects like that, and it adds like a cool effect. And but sometimes you have to like paint over the line art just to give it a little bit more kind of flow between the digital painting and the line art itself, because sometimes the line art would pop out too much, so you would have to like make a layer on top of that. And like the way I like to do it is like kind of select the color next to it and kind of use like a soft edge brush, just kind of like lightly paint over it. I'll even drop the opacity actually down a lot, and I'll just kind of go over it. That way, like the line art itself retains some of that color that is kind of adjacent to it, so it kind of feels like it's a part of the painting. Because true black, like really black, or I should say digital black, is not a real color. You can't see that in real life, so it kind of stands out a little bit too much. Another way I do it is I actually give a color overlay to the line art. I usually do it actually with a gradient overlay, so you can get a little bit more kind of color dynamics. This is just an example, but you can see here, you could play around with these kind of sliders to get a better look for it all. But it does add a cool little quality to it too, if this is the effect you're going for. You'll see it changes it drastically. But you can you can mess around. You could obviously take out certain parts. You could lasso certain parts of the line art and right click and layer via cut, and then change that, give that a certain overlay or something like that. You could, it's Photoshop. You could do a whole bunch of things. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's usually how I digitally paint in Photoshop. Um, Another quick note, I forgot to mention this earlier, I use CS6 now. It's the newest of the Photoshop, but I also use CS3, which I really love for digital painting. And any of the ones before that too, before CS3 prior, work really well in this kind of medium. So a lot of industry professionals use even the old school Photoshops like before the CS era. So they all work pretty awesome. Yeah. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys liked the video, the shorter version at least. Um, Hit subscribe, rate it, comment below if you have any other questions. If you see something I do in my other videos that you would like me to explain a little bit more, just let me know in a message or a comment, and I'll try to do that as soon as possible. I know some of you have actually asked for certain videos, and I am getting to those, so keep an eye out. So until then, check out the links in the description to see where you can find my other artwork, and I'll see you guys around.